In this video, we'll talk about mangrove forests. What are these mangrove forests and why are they special? Mangrove forests grow in what is called the intertidal zone. For those of you who have been to the sea, you will know that the sea rises twice in a day and it rises to a level we call the high tide line, and then twice in the day the water recedes and it goes down to a level which we call the low tide line. So the area between the high tide line and the low tide line is called the intertidal zone. Now these mangrove forests, they grow in this intertidal zone, which means that for some part of the day they are underwater, they are submerged, and for some part of the day they are exposed. Mind you, these are called mangrove forests, not to be pronounced mangrove. Also, they have nothing to do with mangoes. India, along with Bangladesh, have one of the most amazing examples of mangroves called the Sundarbans. The Sundarbans is basically a very large mangrove forest area which is in the delta of the Ganga river. So these are the distributaries of the Ganga river, and where they meet the ocean is where we have the formation of this mangrove forest. This is what the forest looks like, and here you can see the water flowing. Why it is amazing is not only because you have these huge trees. Normally mangrove trees don't often grow this big. Not only do we have these huge trees and a very dense mangrove forest, but we also have many types of deer, and we also have the Bengal tiger in this forest. So what is special about these trees? The first problem is that of salinity. Now, unfortunately, I've had to use a photograph of mangoes, and so again, you're going to think that mangroves have something to do with mangoes. Please remember, they have nothing to do with mangoes. Now, when we put anything in salt water, what does the salt water do? It pulls out all the moisture. Yeah, this is why when we make pickles, anything we pickle in salt, the water gets drawn out. So, salinity is one of the challenges for any plant to survive in mangrove areas, because the salt in the water will tend to pull out any water that is already inside the plant. The second problem is that of water logging. Whenever water stands for long periods and the soil remains excessively wet, you will find that these leaves tend to start drooping and the plant tends to start turning yellow and it dies. Now, this is because for the plant to survive, we need oxygen to actually enter the soil, and that oxygen is used by the roots to stay alive. So if water covers the soil, then the roots are not able to breathe and plants tend to die. So how is it that these mangroves actually survive in this waterlogged soil? The third challenge they face is that of support. We've already seen soil aeration, but the third challenge is that of support. Now, if you look at this mud, it seems to be very sludgy. It's very soft and it's very sludgy. So, when a tree grows to the size as we previously saw, how does it remain standing in such soft mud? This is a third challenge, the answer to which lies in some of the adaptations that can be seen in mangroves. The first adaptation we see is here in this example of a mangrove. This particular mangrove tree is one of the most common, called Avicennia, and you will see that the roots spread out sideways. So this is the tree, and we will learn about these structures here, but the roots actually spread out sideways, and this sideways spread of roots allows the tree to remain standing even in soft mud. The other adaptation can be seen in a type of mangrove called Rhizophora. This is also a very common type of mangrove plant, and here what we see are these prop roots which form a triangular base on which the plant is able to spread its weight out and therefore remain standing. Here's another example. Again, you can see the extent of root spread in the case of Avicennia. Now, the next problem was that of salinity. So, how do they overcome the problem of salinity? Well, one of the things they do is they have on the leaf, they have glands which you can't see with until you actually use a microscope. They have glands, and these glands they actually use energy, and they use this energy to throw this salt out from the leaf. So, if you go to these mangroves in the morning, you will see these salt crystals on the leaf. This salt is formed by salt glands that throw out the salt. Let's look at another adaptation. So this is the adaptation to breathing. How do the roots manage to breathe when they are covered by water? The answer is using these breathing roots called pneumatophores. These are special kind of roots. So here what you will have is you will have the main root of the plant spreading outwards like this, and from there you have these vertical pneumatophores coming out of this. So these are breathing roots, and if you look at them closely, you will see these special holes called lenticels. And if you have studied this in biology, lenticels are holes through which a plant is able to exchange gases, most notably carbon dioxide and oxygen. So this is how they manage to keep the roots alive even when they are submerged under water. Another adaptation which is easier to see in Rhizophora is how glossy and waxy the leaves are. If you remember, in order to remove salt, they use energy. And because they use energy, the water is precious to them. So they want to minimize the loss of water. So in order to minimize the loss of water, they also have these waxy leaves. Whatever water is inside these leaves is not lost easily. The next challenge we haven't discussed so far is that of seed germination. Now, one of the things you will have noticed is that when we put seeds underwater, for a long time, the seeds tend to die. So, how do we manage for seed germination to take place when the when the area around the plant is actually getting when the area around the plant is getting inundated by water many times during the day? Well, the first adaptation we'll see here is something called vivipary or viviparous germination. Okay, viviparous germination. Now, viviparous germination means that the seeds actually germinate on the plant itself. So there would have been a flower here, and that flower would have gotten pollinated, and after the pollination, a seed would have formed, but instead of falling, the seed germinates on the plant itself. And this is called viviparous germination. So these are the baby plants you can see of Rhizophora, and the plant it grows while it is still attached to the parent. Now what happens is, of course, you can see that there's this, the shape is rather odd. This part forms the root, and it has this dagger like shape, and when it falls into the mud, it can pierce the soft mud and in fact form a standing plant. Sometimes they flow away with water, and then they also float. So they float and flow away with water, then establish a new plant. Sometimes they fall quite close to the parent plant itself. How about Avicennia? Now, Avicennia has a different strategy. These are its cotyledons. If you've eaten rajma or germinated it, you'll know that the seed splits into two fleshy parts called the cotyledons. And in the case of Avicennia, you have floating cotyledons. They are buoyant and they float in the water, taking the seed far away from the parent. And once these seeds, these are not seeds, plantlets. So remember, these also have germinated while they're on the parents. Once these plantlets strike mud, then the roots come out first, followed by the shoot, and you will see quite uncharacteristically you have a very solid formed root over here. Yeah, you have a very prominent root that moves downwards and tries to grow. I mean, by growing fast, it lifts the plant out of water as fast as possible. So these are the adaptations that some of the mangrove plants show. Let's look at the distribution of mangroves. So if you look at the map of India, you have Gujarat has a significant quantity of mangroves, followed by parts of Konkan. Not marked on the map are some parts of Kerala. Then you have the Kaveri Delta, the Krishna and Godavari deltas, the Mahanadi Delta, and of course the Ganga Delta. These are the main areas where mangroves are concentrated. Of course, not to forget the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, which have a significant proportion of the country's mangroves. The maximum amount of mangroves are found in West Bengal, followed by Gujarat, and followed by Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So these are the main mangrove areas in the country. Why are they important? Well, the first reason they're important is that they give coastal protection. How do they give protection? Well, for beginners, what happens is that the water, when it enters, does not simply enter and leave in a straight way. It has to force its way through the mangroves, yeah, through these roots into these areas. So why is this good? Well, the first reason it's good is that it limits the amount of coastal erosion. We find that whatever material is deposited here doesn't leave that easily because the flow of water is reduced. The other thing is it also gives protection against things like tsunamis. If you have a large quantity of water rushing through, the presence of trees will reduce the power of the water rushing through. So coastal protection is one of the great advantages. And one of the other reasons why this is extremely important is that the mangrove areas happen to be nutrient rich. Okay, they have lots of nutrients. I'm having some trouble here. They are nutrient rich. Why are they nutrient rich? Because the organic matter that falls, these leaves that are falling, or the alluvium or silt that is carried by the rivers enters the mangroves, and because water flows slowly, it deposits here and remains deposited here. Why is this important? Well, because it is nutrient rich, it supports a large amount of wildlife. Most importantly, it supports a large amount of crustaceans. Okay, crustaceans are prawns, crabs, shrimp. This particular one is the pistol shrimp. If you go into the mangrove, you will hear loud tuck tuck sounds because it uses this large pincer of it like a pistol to stun its prey. You can actually hear this outside the water. The mangroves contain large amounts of these organisms, and these organisms, some of them use the mangroves as a nursery. When they are small, they remain in the mangroves, they remain protected from fish, and then as they grow larger, they move out of the mangroves into the open ocean, and therefore a large amount of our fish in the ocean are actually dependent on these mangroves. Because we have these crustaceans, we also have a large amount of waders and other bird life that lives in these areas. We have many fish species here, some of which are commercially important. This particular one is the red snapper, much sought after fish found in mangroves. We also have a few large animals. Most commonly, we find things like otters, ood bilao in Hindi, and here is a photograph, in fact, of a saltwater crocodile. This is from Bhitarkanika in Odisha, and this is in fact one of the largest saltwater crocodiles in the world. This is Bhitarkanika. This is in Odisha. This is a protected mangrove in Odisha, and this particular crocodile is about 8 meters long, which is as long as two cars, and maybe weighs more than 1,000 kilograms. I'm going to end by talking about my favorite animal, which is like a gym, the what I call the mangrove gym. It is full of these chokrus, these crabs, who have this one large claw and one small claw. So you can see here they have one large claw and the other claw is not as large. Each crab seems to have one large claw. Well, those are the male crabs. The female, in fact, has both normal sized claws. Now, this claw is just for showing off, which is why I call it the mangrove gym. And it's to impress the women and to threaten the other males around. And they do this by waving their claws around. So I'm going to end this video by actually showing you that a video of them. I'm going to show you a video of them waving their claws at each other.